The throne chamber of the alien warship was a place of fear and silence. Great pillars of metal rose to the ceiling, humming with strange energy, and hundreds of alien soldiers stood frozen in place. At the center, on a raised platform, stood the alien queen. Her armor glowed with lines of purple light. Alive and sharp, a sacred thing that no one dared touch. Yet now a crack ran across its chest plate, a mark of insult and danger. When she saw it repaired, smooth, polished, and fixed, her fury shook the entire hall. Her voice was like thunder inside steel walls as she roared, "Who dared touch my armor?" The hall went dead silent. Not a single alien moved. Warriors with blades on their arms, engineers with glowing eyes, even her closest guards all looked at the ground, afraid. The queen's armor was not just clothing. It was a symbol of her power, a weapon that held history older than human memory. To touch it without permission was death. Her roar repeated, echoing off the walls. "Who fixed what was mine?" The echo seemed to hang in the air like smoke. From the back of the chamber, among the shadows, a figure stepped forward. He was small compared to the towering aliens. His clothes were not ceremonial or royal, but simple oil-stained fabric. A tool belt hung around his waist, filled with wrenches, welders, and scraps of wire. He was a human, one of the weakest species in the galaxy, taken long ago as nothing more than servants or prisoners. His dark hair was messy, his face tired, but his eyes carried no fear. He walked forward while every alien in the room whispered in disbelief. The human mechanic stopped at the edge of the queen's platform. He bowed his head for a moment, but when he raised it, his voice was steady. "I did," he said. "I fixed your armor." The crowd erupted in gasps, hisses, and snarls. Alien soldiers shouted insults. "Impossible," one barked. "A human would not dare." Others demanded his death instantly. But the queen raised her hand and silence fell again. Her eyes, glowing with the same purple fire as her armor, locked onto him. She tilted her head, studying this fragile creature that dared claim responsibility. "You," she said slowly, her voice carrying a weight that made even her generals tremble. "A human slave touches my sacred armor? Do you know what crime you admit?" The human did not look away. His voice was calm, almost too calm. It was broken. A weapon like that, left damaged, could fail when you need it most. "I could not leave it that way." His words spread like a shockwave. The aliens laughed cruelly, mocking him. "The human thinks he is a savior," one hissed. "He believes he knows more than our engineers." But still, the mechanic stood straight, his hands at his sides, refusing to show fear. His heart pounded in his chest, but he knew that to step back now meant death. Only courage would keep him alive a little longer. The queen descended from her platform, each step shaking the floor. She towered over him, her armored figure shining like a storm of blades and light. She leaned close, her voice low and dangerous. "Why should a human touch what no alien dares? Do you not fear me?" "I fear you," the human admitted. "But fear does not fix broken things. My hands do." For a moment, silence. The queen studied him, and in her glowing reflection, he looked like nothing more than a fragile insect. Yet his words carried weight. She could feel it, though she hated to admit it. He had not begged. He had not cried. He had spoken as if his work was reason enough to stand against her wrath. The soldiers expected her to strike him down, to tear his body apart in front of them. Instead, she spoke again. "How?" she demanded. "How did you repair armor that even my greatest engineers cannot touch?" The mechanic's lips curved in the smallest hint of a smile. "Because I see things they don't. To them, your armor is holy, too sacred to question. To me, it was simply metal. Metal cracks. Metal bends. Metal can be fixed." The crowd roared in anger at his blasphemy, but the queen raised her hand once more. She was not finished with him. Something in his words gnawed at her pride. She leaned back, her massive form towering above. Her eyes narrowed. "Do you understand what you have done? You could be killed for less." The human's voice was quiet, but every word carried across the chamber. "If I am killed for fixing what is broken, then so be it. But broken things remain broken until someone dares to touch them. The aliens fell into silence again. Even those who hated humans could not deny that his courage was unnatural. The Queen's fury burned, but deep inside it was mixed with curiosity. This human had done more than repair her armor. He had spoken in a way no one else dared. He had faced her with eyes that did not tremble. He was not a soldier, not a general, not even a fighter. He was a mechanic, yet he had stood where no alien would. The Queen raised her hand, and her guards rushed forward, weapons drawn. The mechanic stood still, ready for death. Yet the Queen did not give the kill command. Instead, she stepped closer, her shadow falling over him like a mountain. She bent down, her voice quiet enough that only he and the nearest guards could hear. "You claim to fix what others cannot. Then prove it." The human lifted his head, meeting her gaze. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths. "Tell me what is broken," he said, "and I will." Her eyes glowed brighter. Her soldiers shifted uneasily. None had expected this answer, least of all the Queen herself. For a long moment, the hall remained frozen, the tension like a blade hanging in the air. The Queen straightened, turning back to her throne. Her voice echoed through the chamber. "Bring the machine. Let this human test his words." Gasps filled the hall as the order spread. The mechanic remained still, his hands calm at his sides, though his heart thundered. The Queen had not killed him, not yet. Instead, she had given him a chance filled with danger, but also something more. For the first time, the human mechanic stood not as a prisoner, but as one who had dared answer the Queen herself. And in that moment, a new story began to write itself across the galaxy. A story of a fragile species that refused to bow, even when standing in front of monsters. The chamber doors closed behind the human mechanic with a deep metallic echo. Guards surrounded him on every side, their weapons humming with energy, their eyes filled with contempt. They walked him through endless halls of alien design, walls glowing with strange runes, ceilings breathing with pipes that pulsed like living veins. To them, he was only a fragile creature who had spoken too boldly. To him, every corridor was another reminder that he was deep inside a warship that was never meant for his kind. Yet as he walked, his thoughts drifted not to fear, but to the path that had brought him here. He had not always been trapped among monsters. Once, he had lived on Earth, working in dusty repair shops where the smell of oil and burnt metal filled the air. He was not a soldier or a leader. He was simply a mechanic who could never leave a broken thing alone. When the war came, humans fought desperately. Many died. He was captured, dragged into the void by alien raiders. Most humans taken as slaves were broken into silence, but he was different. His captors soon learned that his skill with machines was valuable, so they chained him in the lower decks, forcing him to repair starships' weapons and engines. He remembered nights where sparks danced against his skin as he worked, his only light in the dark. The aliens mocked him, but they kept him alive, because when their warships failed, it was his hands that brought them back to life. Slowly, his reputation spread through the fleet, the fragile human who fixed what others could not. It was only a matter of time before whispers reached the Queen's throne. Now, as the guards led him deeper, those whispers had become a storm. Soldiers lined the halls to stare at him as he passed. Some laughed. Others spat on the floor. "The little creature thinks himself an engineer," one hissed. Another sneered, "He will decorate the walls when the Queen is done."
Oh, but still.
The mechanic walked forward, his steps steady. They brought him into a vast hangar, where lights blazed down on rows of machines' war engines that looked like beasts made of steel and bone. At the center of the hangar stood one machine greater than the rest. It was enormous, shaped like a giant armored beast, with claws that could crush a tank and weapons carved into its body. Yet it was broken. Cracks ran through its joints, sparks sputtered from its circuits, and its great limbs hung uselessly at its sides. For years it had been a dead monument. Shame to the Queen's engineers, the Queen herself entered, her armor gleaming under the lights, and the hangar went silent. Every soldier dropped to one knee. Only the humans stood upright, too lowly to follow their customs. The Queen's gaze burned into him. "You claim to fix what cannot be fixed," she said, her voice like thunder rolling across steel. She gestured to the broken war machine. "Then show me. Restore this relic. Prove your words, or die with them." The soldiers laughed cruelly. Some called bets on how long the human would last before begging for mercy. Others whispered that the queen only wanted to humiliate him before crushing him completely, but the mechanic did not answer them. He walked slowly around the massive machine, his eyes scanning every detail, every burn mark, every loose cable. He ran his hand across its surface, ignoring the growls of guards who wanted to tear him apart. To him it was not a weapon of terror, not a relic of war, it was just another machine. He crouched near a shattered joint, pressing his fingers against the cooled metal. "Stress fracture," he murmured to himself. He looked at the burned-out circuits. Power lines overloaded. He spotted areas where engineers had patched it clumsily, where their pride had blinded them to simple flaws. He shook his head. They tried too hard. They forgot machines don't need worship. They need care. The queen narrowed her eyes, listening to his words. "Do you dare call my engineers blind?" She demanded. The human did not look up. His voice was calm. "Yes." Gasps filled the hangar. Soldiers reached for their weapons, but the queen raised her hand. She wanted to hear more. The mechanic stood and faced her, grease on his hands, eyes unshaken. "You treat machines like holy relics. You bow before them, afraid to change them, afraid to question them. But machines are not gods. They are puzzles. And puzzles can always be solved." A deadly silence filled the hangar. The queen stared at him for a long time, her armor glowing brighter with her rising anger. Yet deep inside, she felt something else too, a dangerous curiosity. No one in her empire had ever spoken to her like this. No one had dared reduce her war relics to puzzles. And yet, as she looked at the broken beast behind him, she remembered the armor on her chest. It had been repaired smooth, flawless by this same human. She raised her hand again. "You will have one chance," she declared. "One day, to do what others failed for years. If you succeed, perhaps you will live. If you fail, you will die slowly." The soldiers laughed again, sure of his doom. But the human only nodded. "Then I'll need tools," he said. "Real ones, not the scraps you give slaves." The queen leaned forward, her voice cold. "You will have them. But if you live, you cannot do what you claim. Your body will hang outside this ship as a warning to every world." The human met her gaze and said simply, "Then you will have your answer." Queen turned. Her cape of armored plates, shifting like wings of a predator. Her soldiers dragged him toward the machine, throwing crates of tools at his feet. Above, lights blazed down and hundreds of eyes watched him. The hangar was filled with whispers, bets, and laughter. But the mechanic did not hear them. He placed his hand once more on the machine, his eyes tracing its flaws. In his heart, fear battled with resolve. He knew this task was impossible by alien standards. But he was not an alien. He was human. And humans had always found a way to fix the impossible. The first sparks lit the air as he began his work. And for the first time in years, the great war machine stirred. The hangar lights flickered as the human mechanic worked, sparks flying with every strike of his tools. The giant war machine loomed above him like a dead god, its broken body covered in scars of failed repairs. Aliens crowded the platforms high above, their voices a storm of laughter and scorn. To them, this was nothing more than a cruel show, a chance to watch a human fail before the queen's eyes. The queen herself stood at the edge of the platform, her armored figure gleaming with purple light. Her gaze never left the human. She had expected him to tremble, to beg for mercy, to fall apart under the weight of her challenge. Instead, he moved with strange calm, his hands steady, his eyes sharp. He was no soldier, no royal engineer, yet he dared treat her sacred relic as if it were nothing more than a machine in need of fixing. Hours passed. He worked in silence, using crude tools that screeched against the metal. He crawled inside the beast's joints, rewiring power lines, welding fractures, and pulling out circuits long burned to ash. At times, the machine groaned as if alive, and the crowd gasped, thinking it would rise, but then it fell silent again. The aliens mocked him louder each time. One officer sneered, "He is stalling. He cannot repair what our best have failed to touch." Another laughed. "Humans are good for cleaning floors, not for reviving war machines." Their jeers filled the air. But the human ignored them. The Queen finally spoke, her voice echoing through the hangar. "You have worked for hours, little human. Do you think you impress me with sparks and noise? You stand before the relic of my people's glory. If you fail, your ashes will be scattered across the void." The human wiped sweat and grease from his brow and looked up at her. His voice was calm, but his words struck like steel. "You call it a relic? That is why it remains broken. You worship it, but you do not understand it." "I don't see relics. I see a machine. Machines don't care about your pride. They only care about whether you understand them." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Many shouted for his execution immediately, calling him a blasphemer. The Queen raised her hand, silencing them. Her glowing eyes narrowed. "You dare insult my people's wisdom?" "Yes," the human answered. His tone was not arrogant, it was simply true. Because truth doesn't change, even if no one wants to hear it. The hangar went silent again. For the first time, the Queen felt something she had not expected, a sting of doubt. Her engineers had spent years failing at what this human now attempted. Could it be that his defiance was not madness, but something else? The mechanic turned back to the machine. He adjusted wires, rerouted circuits, and with a sudden strike of his tool, the war beast shuddered. A low hum filled the hangar as lights flickered to life along its frame. The sound silenced even the loudest mockers. The beast twitched, gears grinding, sparks spitting from its massive shoulders. For a moment, its glowing eyes flickered faintly. The crowd erupted in disbelief. Some shouted that it was a trick. Others cried that it was impossible. The Queen's hand tightened into a fist. Her anger mixing with an emotion she despised dashed curiosity. The human climbed down from the machine, his chest heaving, his hands covered in black oil. He looked up at the Queen and spoke again, his voice steady, even in the face of death. "I have given it back its breath. It is not yet ready to walk, but it lives again. Your engineers failed because they feared to touch what they didn't understand. I am not afraid." The Queen descended from her platform slowly, each step sending echoes across the hangar floor. She stopped in front of him, towering over his frail body. Her armor gleamed with fire, and her soldiers trembled as they awaited her judgment. She leaned close, her voice sharp as a blade. "You speak as if you are greater than the wisdom of empires. Do you know what such arrogance costs?" The mechanic met her gaze without flinching. "It costs nothing to speak the truth, but it costs everything to ignore it." Her soldiers roared with fury. Some even raised their weapons. But the Queen raised her hand again. She did not strike him, not yet. Instead, she studied him as if searching for weakness. But all she saw was a fragile creature who refused to bend. She turned to her soldiers and declared, "He has woken the machine." Her words thundered through the hangar. But this proves nothing. To fix is one thing. To make it endure is another. She faced the human again, her eyes glowing bright. "Tomorrow, you will finish this work. You will make this relic rise and walk as it once did. If you succeed, perhaps you are worth more than I thought. If you fail," she paused, her voice dropping into a dangerous growl, "your end will be slow, and the galaxy will remember your screams." The human nodded once. His voice was calm, almost too calm for someone facing certain death. "Then tomorrow, you'll have your answer." The hangar doors slammed shut and the soldiers dragged him away. The aliens whispered among themselves, torn between hatred and fear. The Queen stood alone before the half-awakened war machine. Its glowing eyes flickered faintly, casting purple light across her face. For the first time in many years, she felt something she had long forgotten, uncertainty. And deep within her, a question grew like a shadow. If this single human could do what her entire empire could not, then what else could his kind do? The next cycle began with the hangar alive in a tense silence. Soldiers filled the upper platforms, their glowing eyes fixed on the machine that had stirred under the human's hands. Rumors had already spread across the ship like fire. The fragile slave had breathed life into the Queen's war beast. Some mocked the tale, others whispered fearfully, but all had gathered to see what would happen next, at the center of the hangar. The human stood once more before the towering machine. He looked smaller than ever against its massive frame, his simple clothes stained with oil and his arms marked with burns from the day before. He had been given only hours to rest, locked away under guard. Now he returned with nothing more than his tools and the strange determination that had carried him this far. The alien queen entered in silence, her armored steps echoing across the metal floor. The crowd of soldiers dropped to one knee, but her eyes remained fixed on the human. The lines of purple light along her armor flared brighter as she spoke. Yesterday you dared speak as if my empire's wisdom were blind. Today you will prove whether your words are truth or your death sentence. Her arm lifted, pointing toward the massive relic. Make it rise. Make it walk as it once did. Fail, and you will not die quickly. The hangar erupted in cruel laughter and mocking bets. Officers sneered, saying the human had only been lucky the day before. Engineers whispered that he would never understand the deeper systems, the hidden cores of alien design. Yet as their voices swirled around him, the human did not respond. He placed his hand on the cold surface of the machine, feeling its dormant pulse. To him, the laughter was only noise. The machine was all that mattered. He began to work. The first step was power. He crawled deep inside its core, pulling wires and replacing burned circuits with fresh connections. Sparks burst in his face as he forced systems awake. His hands moved quickly, guided by instincts forged in years of fixing broken things no one else dared touch. Hours dragged by. The crowd grew restless. Some jeered, shouting for the Queen to end this farce. Others leaned forward in curiosity as the machine's inner hum grew louder. The human emerged from the chest cavity, covered in black soot, and called for tools. He didn't ask politely, he demanded, his voice steady and sharp. The guards hesitated, glancing at the Queen, but she gave a subtle nod. The tools were handed over. Next, he worked on the joints. Massive servos, rusted and locked, refused to move. The human climbed onto the arms, hammering at bolts, rewiring hydraulics, welding cracks. His small frame looked like an insect crawling across a god's corpse. Yet slowly, the joints began to loosen. Metal groaned, and for the first time in decades, the war beast shifted its weight slightly. The hangar fell silent. Even the mocking voices died away. All eyes widened as the machine twitched, its giant claws flexing faintly. The Queen's gaze burned brighter. Her voice carried across the silence. Still not enough. Make it walk, the human heard her, but he didn't respond. He was already moving to the legs, where ancient mechanisms were fused together. He cut through them, replaced broken gears with pieces scavenged from other machines, and rerouted power lines with reckless creativity. The aliens watching shook their heads in disbelief. Their engineers had studied these systems for years, and this human, with nothing but a crude toolkit, dared to reimagine them. The moment of truth came. The human dropped to the floor, sweat dripping from his brow, his body aching. He wiped his hands and shouted, "Power it on!" The crowd gasped at his defiance. No one commanded the Queen, but she only narrowed her eyes and gestured to her officers. Reluctantly, they activated the energy conduits. The hangar filled with a deep, resonating hum. Lights along the machine's frame blazed to life. Its great claws clenched, sparks dancing as circuits surged with power. The ground trembled as the war beast shifted again, this time with force. One leg rose, unsteady, then slammed down onto the metal floor with a thunderous boom. Soldiers clutched the rails as the machine took its first step in decades. The hangar exploded with shouts. Some cried in disbelief, others in rage, others in awe. The Queen's soldiers had expected a show of failure. Instead, they saw the impossible, their sacred relic alive again. Walking under the touch of a human, the Queen herself remained silent.
Oh.
But her armor flared brighter with every step the machine took. She descended from her platform slowly, her eyes never leaving the human. He stood before the moving beast, exhausted but unbroken, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. She stopped a few steps away, her towering form casting a long shadow over him. Her voice was low, dangerous, yet filled with something new, something her soldiers had never heard from her before. "You have done what my greatest could not. You have woken the relic of my people's pride. Tell me, human, what drives you? Why do you risk your life for machines that are not your own?" The human raised his head, his voice tired but steady. "Because broken things deserve to be fixed. Even if the world calls it impossible. Even if it costs me everything." His words struck like a blade through the silence. The queen stared at him, her glowing eyes unreadable. Around them, the machine stood tall, alive, its massive form looming like a witness to the moment. The soldiers waited for the order to kill him, but the queen did not give it. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the war beast and then to the human. A strange thought stirred in her mind. One she did not speak aloud. If this human can fix what we could not, then perhaps his people are far more dangerous than we ever believed. The hangar remained silent, the tension thick as steel, as the queen raised her hand, not to strike, but to signal. "Remove him," she commanded coldly. "But do not kill him, not yet. I have more questions." The guard seized him, dragging him away once again. The mechanic did not resist. His body was weak, but his spirit remained unbroken. He had faced the queen's wrath and survived. Not with weapons or armies, but with his hands, his mind, and his refusal to bow. And as the doors closed behind him, the queen stood before her awakened war beast, her thoughts a storm she could not silence. For the first time in her reign, she began to wonder if her empire had underestimated humanity. The warship drifted through the silent void, its massive hull glinting in the light of distant stars. Inside, the great hangar still echoed with whispers of what had happened the day before. A human nothing but a slave mechanic had made the queen's relic walk. The impossible had been done before their very eyes, and though the soldiers sneered and tried to laugh away their unease, their voices always lowered when they spoke of it. Fear had begun to gnaw at their pride. In her private chamber, the alien queen sat alone. Her throne was forged from black alloy and carved with the marks of 100 conquests. The glowing lines on her armor pulsed softly, reflecting her mood. She had not moved for hours, yet her mind was far from still. Images replayed in her thoughts. The moment the relic's massive leg had slammed into the floor, the sound that silenced her court. The human standing at its feet covered in soot and oil, yet calm in the face of death. He had looked at her not with the terror she was accustomed to, but with quiet certainty, as if her power meant nothing compared to his truth. No alien had ever spoken to her like that. No alien had dared reduce her war machine to just a puzzle. And yet he had done more than speak. He had proven himself right. Her claws tapped against the armrest of her throne. What kind of creature are humans? She wondered. They were weak, soft, fragile, things unfit for war, unworthy of empires, and yet this one had stood against her wrath, and in doing so, shaken the certainty of her entire court. A shadow moved at the edge of the chamber. One of her generals approached, bowing low. His voice was careful, respectful. "My queen, permission to speak freely?" "Speak," she replied, her tone sharp. "The human is dangerous." The general's eyes burned with contempt, not because of strength, but because of the effect he has on others. Already whispers spread through the ranks. Soldiers doubt. They ask how a slave could succeed where our engineers failed. If you allow him to live, he will poison the empire with his arrogance. The queen's gaze cut through him like a blade. "You believe he is arrogance made flesh?" "Yes, my queen," the general growled. "Allow me to end this problem. I will drag him into the hangar, tear him apart, and display his body as a warning. The whispers will die with him." For a moment, the queen considered it. It would be simple. One command, and the human would be gone. The fear in her court would vanish, replaced by terror. Order would be restored. But deep inside, another voice spoke. And yet, the machine would still be broken if not for him. Her claws tightened on her throne. She rose slowly, her towering figure casting a long shadow across the chamber. "No," she said, her voice echoing. "He lives. Not as a slave. Not as an equal. He lives as a question that demands an answer." The general flinched, daring not to argue further. He bowed and retreated into the shadows. The human sat in a dim cell, his back against the cold wall, his hands still stained with grease. The guards had thrown him there after the test, certain he would be executed soon. Yet the door had not opened again. Hours passed. He closed his eyes, exhaustion pulling him into uneasy sleep. Dreams came, dreams of Earth, of skies blue instead of metallic gray, of engines humming in workshops, of laughter he had not heard in years. But even in dreams, the Queen's voice haunted him. "Why do you risk your life for machines that are not your own?" The door to the cell hissed open. Light spilled in, blinding him. Guards entered, weapons in hand, and yanked him to his feet. He expected death. Instead, they marched him back into the Queen's throne chamber. She sat waiting, her glowing eyes fixed on him as if she had not moved since the day before. He stood before her, his body weak, but his spirit unbent. The Queen's voice was calm but dangerous. "You are alive for one reason. Not because I am merciful, but because I am curious. I demand answers." The human lifted his head, meeting her gaze. Then asked. Her soldiers growled at his lack of respect, but she silenced them with a gesture. "Tell me, human, where does your defiance come from? You are small, fragile. Your people are scattered and weak. Yet you stand before me as if nothing in this galaxy could break you." His answer was simple. "Because I know the truth. You call us weak, but weakness forces us to learn. Fragility forces us to adapt. When everything around you can kill you, you either break or you learn to fix." Her armor glowed brighter, reacting to her shifting emotions. She leaned forward, her voice low. "And you believe this makes humans dangerous?" The human did not hesitate. "Yes, more dangerous than you realize. Because you cannot imagine what a desperate mind can build. You cannot imagine what a fragile species will do to survive." The silence that followed was heavy. Her soldiers stared at him with fury, but none dared move. The Queen herself remained still, her gaze locked on him. Inside her, pride battled with something she despised, respect. She could not kill him, not yet. His words echoed too close to truths she had never spoken aloud. Finally, she rose to her full height, towering above him. "You speak boldly for one who stands at the edge of death." He smiled faintly, though his body trembled with exhaustion. "Death comes for all of us. But not all of us are remembered." Her claws tightened, but she did not strike. Instead, she turned sharply, her cape of armor flowing behind her. "Remove him," she ordered her guards. "But keep him alive. I will decide his fate when I have my answers." As the guards dragged him away once more, the Queen stood alone in the chamber. Her thoughts were no longer steady, no longer certain. She had seen strength in many forms armies, weapons, empires, but never in such a small, fragile creature. And though she would never admit it aloud, deep inside she felt something unfamiliar when she thought of the human mechanic. It was not hatred. It was not contempt. It was respect. The warship's hangar echoed with the sound of tools and the low hum of power lines. For 3 days, the human mechanic had been dragged back and forth between his cell and the great machine he had awakened. The alien queen had not given him freedom, but she had given him access. Every day, her soldiers stood watch as he worked, waiting for him to fail. Every day he returned, covered in soot, burns, and grease but never broken. The war beast loomed higher now, no longer a relic of the past, but a giant stirring back to life. Its joints moved smoothly, its systems pulsed with power, and its eyes glowed brighter than ever. The crowd of aliens no longer laughed when they watched him work. Their whispers were quieter, their sneers less sharp. Even they could not deny what their eyes saw. The human was not only repairing the impossible, he was reshaping it. The queen arrived in silence, her armored steps filling the hangar with dread. Her soldiers fell to their knees, but her gaze went straight to the human. He was crouched under the massive chest of the machine, sparks showering as he welded new circuits into place. He did not stop working even when her shadow fell across him. "You labor as if the threat of death does not hang over you," she said coldly. The human slid out from beneath the machine, his face streaked with sweat and oil. He looked up at her, his voice calm as ever. "Death isn't what I fear. Leaving something broken when I could fix it, that's worse." Her eyes narrowed, the purple glow intensifying. "You speak as if machines matter more than life itself." He shook his head. "Not machines. What they mean? A broken machine is a symbol of failure. Fixing it means hope, power, survival. You should know that better than anyone." Her soldiers stirred angrily, but she raised her hand, silencing them. Something in his words unsettled her. He did not speak like a slave. He spoke like someone who believed every word. Someone who had chosen defiance, not out of arrogance, but out of truth. "Then show me," she commanded. "Show me what you claim only humans can do." The human stood, his body aching, but his mind sharp. He motioned to the machine, and with a series of careful switches and connections, the war beast roared to life. This time, it did not stumble or falter. It rose to its full height, towering over the hangar, its footsteps shaking the ground. Its claws flexed, its weapons hummed with dormant power. And for the first time in generations, it moved as if it had never been broken. Gasps erupted across the hangar. Soldiers stumbled back, their faces pale with awe. Even the generals, who had mocked him the loudest, could not hide their fear. The machine was alive again, and stronger. The queen's voice cut through the chaos. "Impressive. But you repaired what already existed. You restored what was lost. That is not creation. That is obedience." The human's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "Then maybe you should look closer." Confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. The queen's eyes narrowed as she studied the war beast. At first, it looked as it always had, but then she saw it. Subtle differences. Extra lines of energy running across its armor. Reinforced joints that gleamed with new alloys. Systems that pulsed with far greater power than before. Her voice was sharp. "What have you done?" The human wiped his hands on his stained clothes, standing beneath the towering machine as if it were his own creation. "I didn't just fix your relic. I improved it. Your engineers worshipped it, afraid to change what they didn't understand. But I saw flaws, weaknesses. I made it better." The hangar erupted in chaos. Generals shouted that this was treason, that he had desecrated their sacred war beast. Soldiers demanded his execution. The air shook with fury. But the queen raised her arm, and silence fell like a blade. She stepped closer, her eyes blazing with fury and something else, something more dangerous. "Curiosity, fear, respect. You dare alter what is mine." She growled. The human did not flinch. "Yes, because perfection isn't worship, it's work. Machines aren't holy. They're tools. And tools can always be made stronger." For a long moment, the queen stared at him, her chest rising and falling with controlled fury. Her soldiers trembled, expecting her to strike him down, but she didn't. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the towering war beast. Its eyes glowed brighter than ever, casting shadows across the chamber. She knew, deep down, that he had done what even her ancestors never dared. He had broken tradition, and in breaking it, he had made something greater. Her soldiers whispered, fear thick in their voices. "If one human can do this," one muttered, "what could an army of them achieve?" The queen silenced them with a glance, but the thought gnawed at her. She hated it. She denied it, but she could not erase it. She turned back to the mechanic, her voice like a blade. "You are not free. Do not mistake my patience for mercy, but you are no longer just a slave. You will work under my command until I decide your fate. Fail me once, and your death will be slow." The human's voice was steady, almost defiant. Then give me something worth fixing. The chamber fell silent. Soldiers stared in shock at his audacity. Yet the queen did not kill him. Instead, she turned sharply, her cape flowing like black fire, and left the hangar. As the doors closed behind her, the whispers rose again, louder and more fearful than ever. The soldiers could not laugh anymore. They had seen too much. The human had not just repaired the queen's relic, he had changed it, and somewhere deep within the queen's mind, a truth began to grow. Truth she refused to say aloud. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was dangerous. The throne chamber was darker than usual. Shadows clung to the high walls, and the great banners of conquest seemed smaller beneath the silence. Every soldier, every officer, every general in attendance stood tense, as if the very air had grown heavy. At the center of it all, the alien queen sat upon her throne, her glowing armor pulsing with sharp light, and before her, bound in chains but standing tall, was the human mechanic. The relic he had restored and improved stood in the hangar below, now the pride of the fleet once more. But pride had turned to fear. Soldiers whispered of his skill, engineers doubted themselves, and generals questioned their worth. The queen's court had been shaken. And now the queen demanded her answer. She rose slowly, her figure towering, her presence pressing down on the hall like a storm. Her voice echoed, sharp and cold. Human, you stand alive, not because you deserve life, but because you confuse me. You fixed what none could. You changed what none dared. You spoke against my empire, and yet survived. Now I demand the truth. Why? The crowd leaned forward, waiting for his end. None believed he would walk away. The human lifted his head, his face smeared with soot, his eyes steady as they met hers. His voice was calm, almost soft, but every word carried like thunder. Because broken things deserve to be fixed, even if the galaxy says they are beyond repair. The court erupted in angry cries. Blasphemy, shouted one general. Execute him now, roared another. Guards stepped forward, weapons raised. But the queen silenced them with a single gesture of her clawed hand. Her glowing eyes locked onto him. You dare call my empire broken? She growled. The human did not look away. His voice sharpened, every word cutting deep. Yes, you build monuments to power, but you let them rot. You worship relics, but you fear to touch them. You command loyalty, but your people whisper doubt in the shadows. You are strong, but strength built on fear is always cracked beneath the surface. That's why your machine failed. That's why you need me. The chamber went still. No one breathed. No alien had ever spoken to her like this, and lived. The queen descended from her throne, each step a rumble of authority. She stopped before him, her towering figure cloaked in light, her face unreadable. She leaned close, her voice low, dangerous. And what of you, little human? Do you claim you can fix even me? The mechanic's chains rattled as he straightened, his small frame standing defiant before her. His answer was simple, quiet, but it struck the hall like a blade. Even you, queen. Gasps rippled through the court. Generals shouted, some in rage, some in fear. Guards raised their weapons again, desperate for the order to strike him down. But the queen raised her hand once more, and all fell silent. She stared into his eyes for a long, endless moment. In his gaze, she saw no lies, no trembling fear, only the same calm certainty that had brought her relic back to life. The same audacity that dared to call her empire broken. The same fire that whispered of something her people could never understand. Respect, she hated it. She feared it. And yet she could not deny it. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying across the chamber. Take him away. He will not be executed. Not yet. He will live. He will work. He will answer when I call. The guards hesitated, confused, but obeyed. The human was led from the chamber, chains clattering against the floor. He did not resist. He only looked back once, his eyes steady, as if he had planted a seed that no power in the galaxy could tear away. The queen returned to her throne. But her thoughts were not steady. She felt a weight she had never known before. The human's words echoed within her, even you, Queen, and for the first time in her reign, she felt the faint crack of doubt in the armor of her certainty. The court remained silent, shaken. The whispers would not stop now. A single human had defied their queen and lived. A single human had done what they could not, and somewhere in the void, beyond their warship, other humans still waited. The galaxy would never see them the same way again.